Welcome back. It's Tim and Julie Harris. And this is, of course, Real Estate Coaching Radio, your favorite daily real estate coaching and training podcast. And we've got another podcast today that is that has been motivated by a lot of requests we've been getting from coaching clients. And there's a lot of issues out there with regards to pricing. And you guys have heard Julie and I give you a lot of scripts and a lot of suggestions, a lot of different, levels of coaching on this podcast. I want to start out by saying that we'll do our best on this podcast to give you as much information as we can, but we've only got you for roughly 30 minutes a day. So when you hear something that that hits with you, that a little epiphany that goes off, where you realize that's a maybe a knowledge gap that you needed to have filled, that is just the tip of the surface when it comes to what you'll get from Premier Coaching. And I want to let all of you know that Julie and I we're hosting a series of masterminds, and we're both a little tired from doing it, but we're going to continue to do them because you guys continue to sign up for them. So we're going to be doing some masterminds this week, and I think we're doing 3 of them. And we want you to join. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be covering helping you overcome the 3 greatest challenges that agents are having right now in their real estate businesses. And these are challenges that we have, that we frankly knew about, but we then surveyed our top coaching clients and asked them what their greatest challenges were. And they confirmed that what we had surmised was what their issues were as well. And look, guys, this is a unique market. The challenges that you're having now are not the same ones as you were having last year. There's a lot of confusion out there. People feeling like they had a slow start to the year. Some people had a fantastic start to the year. No matter where you are, whether you're on track, whether you're behind for your goals for the year, whether you're ahead of your goals for the year, or maybe you haven't even set goals for the year, this mastermind is perfect for you. The link is down below, or if you'd like to just go directly to the website. If you're, for example, just driving or whatever, just go to joinpremiercoaching.com, joinpremiercoaching.com. Or if you're listening to us on YouTube or watching us on YouTube or any of the other platforms that we publish on, you can just scroll down below and you can see the link for joinpremiercoaching.com. But definitely register right away. Like I said, these are some of the most successful events that we've done in a long period of time based on the feedback that we're getting from everyone. And we are going to use backdrops that are going to be a little bit less folksy. So don't be surprised if the backdrops look slightly different. We have other backdrops in place. So don't be freaked out if it looks different than our normal YouTube podcast. All right, Julie, so let's roll in. So we're talking about The Price is Right, how top agents nail it every time.
That's right. And as you said at the top, this is by special request because there's lots of changes going on in the market. But pricing is one of the most important skills that a real estate professional can master, that should master. And in today's market where inventory is rising, buyer motivation is inconsistent, even buyer qualification is now sometimes inconsistent, and interest rates are shifting nearly every day, mispricing a property can be the difference between a successful closing and an expired listing. Which one would you rather have? Excuse me for a second.
This is interesting, Julie. As I was looking over your notes, these notes would be great to take to a listing appointment too and show the seller,
Sure.
especially with an expired listing, what would be, something, an informational handout for a seller, but also, again, for an expired seller, showing them all the complexity that goes into putting a price on a property. And then they can kind of go through it themselves and educate themselves. And there's a great script that we use, and I would teach you guys this in coaching and teach you really how to apply it. But when you're talking to an expired seller, you got to remember a lot of times they're coming from a place of feeling rejected. The house didn't get sold. Maybe it's a house they love. They raised their family in it or whatever. So you got to ease that feeling of rejection by saying, Mr. Seller, listen, sometimes the best homes don't sell. And it's not for the reasons you've probably been told. And that's going to open up their minds to listening to what you have to say, because what they're expecting you to say is what everyone else says, that it's just all about price. Now, probably it's price, condition, or location, but just with regards to pricing, you could give them this information and they could see, well, you know what, when we put it on sale originally with the previous agent, we certainly didn't drill down to this level. So if you want the notes from today's podcast, which you definitely want to have, as I said, this would be great to give as a handout for your, future sellers, or just really for your own self in your education of your team or your brokerage or just whatever. You can always get all of our notes. And the only place we're going to share them and that's free, is harrisrealestatedaily.com. So if you want our notes, just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. All right, Julie, let's go to step 1. Know your subject property. Seems like a basic thing, but there's a heck of a lot more to knowing your subject property.
That's right. And whether you're on the buyer side and trying to advise your buyer where they should come in with their offer, or you're pricing a new listing, or maybe you're taking over an expired for somebody, pricing rules all pretty much apply in all scenarios. Pricing begins with understanding the property itself, knowing how to compare it accurately to what's happening in your local market. And remember to take it property by property. Just because these comps say this on this one and there's longer days on the market doesn't mean that your next listing appointment won't have a different profile. So start broad and then narrow in. And I'm just going to go through a couple of bullet points, and we can pause if you want to, Tim, because this is important. Step number one is just know what you're dealing with, right? Geographic area. Typical residential homes keep your comps within the same or competing neighborhoods. Agents make a mistake using just the neighborhood that the house is in, but what competes with it? The school district. In areas where schools matter, which isn't everywhere, don't cross school district lines unless you have to. Know how your local schools stack up against each other. And then, of course, the age of the home. Stick within plus or minus 10 years if you can. And if you're don't have enough comps, expand if necessary. If you're dealing with older homes, you've got to take into consideration whether you're using comps that are rehabbed, not rehabbed, tear down, half tear down. What are you dealing with? So maybe the house is 46 years old, but it's a fresh rehab. So is that really a comp for your 46-year-old house that needs everything? So take that into consideration. And similarly, condition and curb appeal. Consider the age of the roof, the HVAC, appliances, all of those things. And size. This is another mistake. If you're comping a 2,500 square foot home, don't search just for 24 to 26. You're going to have to expand to actually capture enough homes. So in that case, I'd search 1,900 to maybe even 3,100 to start, see how many comps I've got, and then narrow it down to get as accurately, as close as possible to the subject property. And cost per square foot, another big mistake. Now, for a long time, when the market was super hot, you could pretty much use cost per square foot and be fairly accurate. Or you could use the last highest best comp, throw 10% on the top, and you were good to go. But now that you've got more competition, and some of you have competition from new construction, you can't only use cost per square foot. I would use that as one thing to help circle the wagons in on the right price. But be careful, because smaller homes often have a higher price per square foot than larger ones, and new construction cost per square foot is also different. So don't just hang your hat on that. And then last but not least, in the knowing your property, is the style and uniqueness. Is the home typical of the neighborhood, or does it stand out? Adjust accordingly. You and I used to do a lot of either ranches or 2 stories. And if it was a bi-level or a split level, then that was more complicated. And even appraisers would look at that differently. It was a little bit unusual. Similarly, if your listing or your upcoming listing or what your buyer's bidding on is the only contemporary home in a sea of colonial houses, maybe that's going to affect the pricing, maybe not.
And obviously the rules when it comes to really luxury, a lot of Julie's private clients, their average sale price is probably a couple $1,000,000. When you're dealing with really expensive, I'd say nowadays probably really expensive. Most of the country is going to be, $3 million. Expensive in most of the country, like even where Julie and I are from, would be like $1.5 million kind of thing. But if you go coastal or, you guys get the gist. When you start dealing with stuff like that, it's going to get way more intricate than just Julie's list right there. You're going to have to deal with just who the builder was, maybe if it's a newer home. You're going to have to deal with where Julie and I sold real estate. The last parts of our career was this area called New Albany Country Club, and the roofs were actually a slate. And a slate replacement roof on one of the houses we would sell could be upwards to $350,000, $400,000. And if there was a hailstorm that went through and the slate got damaged and the seller didn't claim it on homeowners insurance and so on and so on and so on. So there's so many intricate things. And I'll say just on the normal price range stuff, Julie, the little things where you see agents screw up a lot, especially I'm going to go back to expired listings because I'm excited about expired because a market like this creates so much opportunity for, agents to go after expired. But if you're not intimately aware of the differences between one side of the street and the other, you're going to overprice something or frankly underprice something, but you're going to end up with an expired listing. But it could just be simply that the road noise on one side of the street, the houses face each other, but over here it's not as desirable because the houses, when you're on the street between the houses, you can't hear the road noise. But when you're in the houses across the street, when you're in their backyard, you can hear the road noise. You guys get it?
That's right.
So if you don't know the differences and you're using a model match for, a neighborhood and you're not taking into consideration this side of the street takes longer to sell, it takes all the, the neighbor, or rather the owner is going to know that. But when you show up to the listing appointment, and let's say you're dealing with the house that's on the less desirable side of the street and you're using homes that are more desirable as comps, you're going to overprice it. You're going to miss the market.
That's right.
And what's more, the seller's not going to tell you. You know, the seller's not going to say, "Hey, Bob, you know what? You're using comps and are making my house look more expensive than it probably should be." They're going to say, "Okay, Bob, let's list it," and then you're
Hmm.
going to end up with an expired listing because this,
And they're going to blame you. They're going to say it was
totally.
your price. You're the one who priced it.
That's when you know when you went wrong. When the seller basically that this is again, when you guys are in coaching, you're going to learn. You avoid certain words because they're sort of trigger words for sellers. And
Hmm.
you have to have your conversation stacked in such a way in anticipation of maybe getting a price reduction or having to reposition. Don't ever say lower the price, for example. Say reposition the house in the market so that it correctly reflects the market's expectations. You're going to have to learn to have price reduction techniques. And one of the ones that we teach you in Premier Coaching, it's basically the call before the call. I'm not going to give you the scripts now, but I'll model it out for you. So, when you take a listing, you tell the seller that after so much time, 10 weeks, 2 weeks or 10 showings, whichever comes first, we're going to reposition the house in the market so that it correctly reflects the buyer's expectation if there's not a written verified offer. And you write it down, the seller writes it down, you put a pop-up memo in there. Everybody knows it's happening, okay? So they know that's happening. So let's say you set it out for 3 weeks or, 15 showings or something. You have adjusted accordingly depending on what your market days on the market actually is. You need to do a call before the call. So you need to call a week ahead of the actual day you're going to reduce the price and say, "Hey, Bob, this is Tim with eXp Realty. I just want to let you know we're about a week out from repositioning the house in the market. So this week, right before we reposition the house, is really important. So when you get any showing appointments, make sure the house is tip top, da 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 da." And you can do that even in a text. Just make sure they respond so they acknowledge they've read it. But the reason you're doing it this way is because if you just call them out of the blue and just say, "Time to reduce the price," you're completely unpolished. You're just amateurish. You're hackish. You have absolutely no bedside manner when it comes to bringing bad news to the seller. You call them up and you say, "You know what? It's time to lower the price." They're probably going to say no, or they're going to ask you for, you got to do, they're going to be pissed off basically. It's a long story short, because
Yep.
you just hit them over the head with bad news in their minds. They're going to maybe put more demands on you. "My brochures aren't good enough. I want a better virtual tour. I want the Goodyear blimp to fly over my house. 10 open houses. Why isn't HGTV filming an episode of all those things?" And that's what happens if you guys don't build your listing business around a system that's based on proven techniques and conversations. And when Join Premier Coaching, by the way, we do give you, what is it, Julie? 120-day, what's it called?
It's called the seller's 12-week communication plan.
There you go. And it tells you exactly what you should be doing every single day, much of which you can delegate to an assistant if you wanted to. But you need to be having the conversations, like I said, so that when it comes around to actually doing price reductions or whatever, it's not going to be something that will result in the seller all of a sudden resenting you, let alone you getting fired. All right, Julie, point number 2, step number 2, gather comparable sales.
That's right. So the first step is you're just getting to know what are you even supposed to be comparing. Step number 2, as Tim said, gather comparable sales. Once your search parameters are set, now you can pull consistent and accurate comps. You're going to look at sold. That's the proof of value. That's what actually happened. You're going to look at pendings. These are the listings you would have competed against, but now seemingly are successful. And we're going to look at active. That's the current competition. Your price has to make sense in all 3 categories. Again, mistake is to only use sold and not consider what you're up against active wise, especially in a changing market, right? So the solds may say that you should be priced higher than you are, but when you look at pendings, maybe the pendings have been on the market for a long time before they went pending. And maybe the actives are also racking up average days on the market. That would indicate that in spite of the fact that your solds look high, people aren't achieving that previous sold price, probably because there's so much competition. Then you track the key metrics like average. I think I talked about that a second ago. Average list to sell price ratio, the pending prices, the days on the market, price reductions before going pending. Does it seem like all of the stuff that's pending took 3 price reductions to get there? That's an indication of a changing market. Then you've got incentives. Maybe the only things pending or closed were paying for closing costs. Or maybe most of what's pending in that zip code is new construction because they're buying down the interest rate. And look at the number of competing homes if you listed today. All of these things go into your pricing strategy, which is step number 3, what we're going to talk about next. Remember to preview as much as possible, especially those of you who are new or newer at pricing.
Let's start out.
Even if you're experienced, but you're out of your regular neighborhoods, you need to be previewing. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to, you don't have in your notes, I just scanned it, but this is a really good thing to add in there. We need to share with them how to do an absorption study because it's a great way to go about pricing. And so in the Premier Coaching, we teach you guys when talking with the seller about price, don't ever go in with a resolute price in a market like this because there's so much uncertainty. A lower skilled agent is going to just placate the seller and tell the seller whatever they want to hear. Or frankly, maybe a lower skilled agent doesn't know how to properly price something. So don't go in with some, grandstanding, this is my price, you're just going to lose. So when you're presenting to a seller, you always, and I'm not going to, again, I don't have time today to give you, because Julie and I have to get to another Zoom.
Absorption rate's pretty hairy. We do that in coaching more than we can do on a podcast.
Right. But I'm going to give them an overview just so they
Yep.
can have it in their minds, right? So you tell the seller that they have a choice between, three different pricing. And the upper end price, just in plain terms, it's, obviously the high end above market price, the on target price, and the below market price. So the way let's say the house is worth $600,000 based on your CMA. But you don't, but the seller, thinks it's worth 625. Maybe another agent told him it was worth 625. So, this is the overview of the script. So Mr. Seller, listen, I appreciate the fact that you feel like the house is worth 625. And now that I've seen the property, I understand why you think that. You're right. The backyard is fantastic and your kitchen definitely has, it's nicer than some of the comparables I use. So I definitely understand why you wanted to price it at 625. Even though the market is telling us, remember, not your CMA, the market is telling us it's worth 600. So I'm going to give you three different scenarios, Mr. Seller, but before you choose which pricing is best for you, I want you to consider this. And then I want you guys to pull out an actual piece of paper that has all the printed homes for sale. And don't forget the new construction stuff that's competing with that seller's house. But what you want to do is you want to organize it so that it's based on you want to have one that has the available properties, and then you want to have one that has the recently sold properties. And this is a very clever way to get a seller to see the realities of pricing. So you're going to show the seller let's say the sold properties, and you're going to show them the sold properties and the days on the market. And these are legitimately good comps, plus or minus, for their particular property. So you're going to ask the seller, you're going to give it to the seller, and you're going to have circled the days in the market. You're going to have circled what the average price was and the rest of it so they can see. And what they'll see when you organize this information correctly, you just have to put it into the search fields into the MLS and it'll do it for you. Julie's having allergies. We can't hear you, Julie. That's fine. Yeah. Oh, I think she muted herself. Did you?
Sorry.
Oh,
I tried
almost.
to.
Yeah, pretty good. All right. So our Puerto Rican bodies aren't used to the
Appalachian Spring.
Exactly. So yes, that's how you're going to basically structure it. And then they're going to see that the higher the price. So Mr. Seller, listen, I have a question for you. Remember, going back to price. So remind me, Mr. Seller, ideally, how soon do you want this property sold? You already know because you're pre-qualified in, but they're going to say, we need the property sold within 120 days. Okay, I appreciate that. So based on this information I'm showing you now, if you were to price the house at 625 for similar property, and then you're going to show them on the list, guys. And if you're not on YouTube, I'm doing my best to describe it. It's a list with the most expensive properties, because this is statistically how it almost always works. The most expensive properties have the largest list to sell price ratio difference. In other words, they sell for less of the original list price, and they take longer to sell. So you're going to show the seller. So Mr. Seller, the houses that are priced at 600. No, the houses that are priced at 575, they take like 7 days to sell, and they sell for asking price, if not over asking prices. And you can see on this list, Mr. Seller, the houses that are priced at 600, they take like a month to sell, but they sell for pretty much asking price. Here's a couple that sold for over asking price. And the ones that are over 600, here's what we're seeing. They either don't sell, or they're taking 90, 120 days, sometimes up to 6 months to sell. And we're seeing these. I put little red stars by them so you can see it. These are the ones that have expired and were relisted. And relisted, unfortunately, for the same price. It wasn't in alignment with what the market's expectations were. So from what you're telling me, you want the house sold and closed within 120 days. So you tell me, where would you like to price it? Would you like to price it here, where the market's going to see it as an incredibly good value at like 585? Would you like to price it here at 600, where it's going to take probably every bit of 120 days to sell and close? Because remember, in our market, it can take up to, even after we have an acceptable contract on it, it could take another 45 days to close. Or you want to do it out of alignment with the market's expectations, knowing that there's a really good chance the property's not going to sell. So you tell me what you'd like to do, and just shut up. And they're going to see the realities, versus you going in there with just your personality and trying to woo them and wow them with your magic fingers.
Yeah, or dictate your price.
Right.
And then the worst part is agents that do that and the seller doesn't agree with them. They walk away like they had some victory. I turned it down.
I know.
Yeah, okay, you turned down an opportunity to help somebody and make a commission for yourself.
It is worth mentioning.
Yeah.
It is worth mentioning if they do have the most important thing in all of our scripts when you're dealing with sellers, really buyers, but buyers really never had that much motivation compared to a seller, is you have to pre-qualify them and know what their motivation is. So let's say, for example, going back to my scenario, you have a seller that does want to essentially price it at 625, even though it's worth 600, but they know, and you know, everyone's on the same page with regards to the house having to be closed essentially within 5 months. They have to have the money for the house. So you can say, Mr. Seller, listen, we can go ahead and price it at 625. I mean, who knows? There could be a big announcement of some local employer that's hiring a bunch of people. Interest rates could go down. So let's go ahead and price it at 625. But let's agree that after 2 weeks or 10 showings, if we don't have a written verified offer on the property, that we'll reposition it on the market to correctly reflect the market's expectations. You guys see what I'm doing there? I'm giving the seller all the information. Remember, this was not me giving you our scripts. This is just an overview of what we teach you when it comes to pricing and Premier Coaching. But I'm giving you an overview because you need to understand that, frankly, it's not that complex to price a property correctly. And I'm going to tell you guys something else. You will find yourself, if you're just a lazy agent, and having a system, an AI to create your CMA for you, and you're just taking that to your listing presentation and you're competing against somebody else that knows how to have these types of conversations and show the statistical information and the relevance, why it's important, you're going to lose every single time. And I can pretty much guarantee you, Julie, 99.9% of all the agents that are listening to us or watching us right now don't really know how to do a real CMA because they've been spoiled and almost kind of ruined by using these, these bot CMAs that don't really create, that you're never really educated knowing how to do.
100% agree. And I do hear agents getting excited about, I can get AI to do my CMA. Well, AI, and I have coaching clients that are using AI for some of the research, certainly. They can go deeper, they can pull other records, that's fine. But to a person, they've all said the same thing. They don't have my local expertise. The AI isn't going to know about the road noise. They're not going to know that that house is 3 houses in from the busy street and the comp they're using is embedded in the neighborhood on a quiet cul-de-sac. Right. That's the type of thing that makes a difference. And this yeah.
But Julie, also, sorry for interrupting you, but also the undulations in the interest rates. Or like I said, some local employer just announces that, the tariffs are going to form a whole bunch of new factories and businesses, who knows what. And all these little tiny changes that it could affect the housing market. If you're in a relatively tight housing market, which a lot of you still are, and again, Julie and I experienced this when we sold real estate. And we've had billions of coaching clients who've done the same thing. You could know about a local employer that's about to do a bunch of layoffs, or you could know about a local employer that's about to do a bunch of hires. And when that happens, both those scenarios really can immediately affect pricing. So if you've got a bunch of listings and you heard from the grapevine that ABC company is about to hire, 1,000 new employees are all going to be wanting to live in the neighborhood where you have this listing, you can pretty much guess that, and even if you were tipping, about to lower the price, you're probably priced even a little bit lower for the market that's about to start happening within a week or two. You guys get it? And if the same thing happens with unemployment or, some company that's downsizing or, maybe they got dozed, who knows? But yeah, you guys got to get that out of your head that it's proper pricing and knowing how to explain it is really a superpower. If you're dealing with a analytical type person and you go in there, like when Julie and I would go to really expensive listings, Julie is obviously the more analytical between the two of us, and she would have, and we knew what we were walking into. It was some CFO, accountant, doesn't matter what. And she'd go in there with one of her really elaborate CMAs, like you guys can't believe. And that alone, they could care less about our cat and monkey show and our listing this and our over that. They just love the fact that Julie Harris created this amazing CMA for them. And it's just, they just will get it and they'll start picking through it and read it and they won't take their eyes off of it. And that's when you've got the listing because you've done something no one else knows how to do.
Well, where I learned that is in previous listing appointments, we ran into a seller that had a big old spreadsheet of all of the comps that they had been collecting. And some of them were off market and some of them were comps that I didn't have. And I pledged from that moment forward to follow the 7 Ps that we teach in Premier Coaching. Proper previous planning prevents pitifully poor performance. And I would change that in this case, proper pricing prevents pitifully poor performance. Now, there were many appointments where I would have all of my ducks in a row and I'd have all of these things that we're talking about on this podcast and certainly even more from Premier Coaching. And I didn't use all of it. Not every situation do you go into all, charts and graphs and spreadsheets. No. You don't need to do that. However, I do strongly believe that you should be able to,
Prepared.
you should be prepared if you run into the seller. And maybe the seller you pre-qualified on the phone is different than their spouse, who is totally analytical and isn't, there's no way they're going to list with you unless you show them that you know what you're doing price wise. It's better to be over prepared and not use all of it than to be under prepared and either have to BS your way out of it or misprice it and end up with an expired, or in some markets, they'll just flat out fire you if it sits on the market after 30 days, especially if it's a previously very hot market. So I would rather send our coaching clients more prepared and have them have more confidence that if they run into that situation, they'll be able to handle it versus freaking out and maybe even losing the listing over it.
Right. And the worst at doing CMAs are the ones that you guys who do most of your business from centers of influence and past clients, because you assume that your past relationship with this person is going to somehow make it so that you're not going to have to do as much work. And maybe in a really hot seller's market where the seller's not that particular who they list with because they know the house is going to sell itself, you may have gotten away with being a little bit lazy like that. But in an ultra competitive market like what we're experiencing now, with a lot of agents out there wanting to be listing agents, and at the same time where you're dealing with sellers that are feeling a lot of senses of uncertainty. That's what you kind of hear in the zeitgeist nowadays with regards to just, real estate in general. And sellers are going to be a lot more careful who they list with because they're not going to be that confident that the house is going to sell. You really have to not be complacent, even with your best centers of influence and past clients, because you have to assume every single time you're going to be competing. All right, Julie, step number 3.
Yes, we covered a lot of that in our
We
conversation
did.
here. The action steps. What we're talking about in step 3 is to create your strategic pricing plan. Now that you've got your comps, you know your subject property really well. Perhaps you've even gone and previewed some of the competition and what's pending. So now your action steps, you use the NAR script. According to NAR, National Association of Realtors, if after 2 weeks or 10 showings, we don't have a workable offer, we need to reposition the price, not slice, cut, or reduce. We need to reposition the price to more accurately reflect market expectations. That's you setting them up that if we are wrong, because after all, pricing is not as much as we try and make it scientific for you, sometimes it might sit longer than you want to. You're giving them that pre-coaching. And I remember, Tim, we used to actually have sellers that would call and say, well, we've had 10 showings and we haven't any good offers, so it's time to reduce. Okay, so consider a pre-inspection as well. Prepare 3 net sheets. You talked about that, low, medium, and high. Let the seller choose. That's why that works. And do a last reality check against active listings. How do you stack up if there's a buyer looking at your listing today? Is it going to look priced right? Yes or no? So the rest of it, we mostly talked about. Other things, rate changes, new listings or solds nearby, inventory going up or going down. I always encourage agents, if they've had a delay, that you talk to them and they were staging the house and it took 2 weeks to get on the market, revisit the comps. Something probably happened. Your previous competition went pending. Why was that? Is that because they reduced it by 40 grand? You ought to know that, right?
And one of the techniques that Julie's elite clients use, and by the way, if you guys are interested in having being considered as one of Julie's elite clients, what are you looking for? 4 clients?
Up to 4, sure.
Yeah, so Julie's looking for 4 personal elite coaching clients, and these are for, frankly, Julie's coaching is the most expensive coaching we have in our coaching business, and she's particular about who she works with. If you're interested in being coached by Julie, we don't have a fancy funnel to for you to set it up an appointment. Here's how it works: just text me directly at 512-758-0206, and when you do, just say I'm interested in being coached by Julie, and then give me a little bit of background on you. And I would say probably every time we mention this, we always get like 20 people texting me, and maybe 2 are good fits, because for the most part, if you're not relatively stable and with lead generation, or really with your mindset, frankly, when I contact you, and I'll probably call you back, I'm going to ask questions that are going to be helping me to discover whether or not you're somebody that's really serious about your real estate business, or whether you're just sort of passing through. Maybe you're just looking for the latest shiny object or things like that. Those aren't great coaching clients for Julie. And she only handles like maybe 12 clients at a time. I'll suggest, if you're not 100% certain that really what your path forward is, maybe coaching's not a good fit for you. That's just the truth. You're probably just going to be wasting your money. A good starter point for all of us, obviously, in our coaching industry, or in our business, is obviously Premier Coaching. That we've made Premier Coaching really providing way more value than we probably had to. But Premier Coaching is a good natural step for all of you. But if you're really looking for the ultimate in real estate coaching, if you've maybe experienced some other real estate coaches before and you're looking for somebody who's really going to turn it on for you long term and really help you go to the next level, text me directly at 512-758-0206. Now, I'm going to give you guys one little advanced coaching tip with regards to pricing. This is for, again, I'm thinking of Julie's coaching clients, which got me thinking about the fact that you told me the other day you're looking for 4 clients. So so a lot of Julie's clients are upper end clients, and they'll oftentimes be listing homes that are custom homes. In other words, there's no real, there's no easy buttons like model matches or anything like that. You can use cost per square footage. You can use the age of the home. The seller is going to be totally biased about a lot of those things. And so again, these are for more expensive listings, but if you come across a seller that's resolute on a price that is not in alignment with the market based on your market knowledge, because you've seen all the things that that house is competing against and what has sold, and you know for a fact that nowadays in your particular marketplace, the contemporary homes on 5-acre lots that look like they're out of Miami Vice in the 80s, aren't the jam because everyone else is into brick Georgians. You guys get my point? But the seller doesn't see it that way. One of the little strategies that you can offer to the seller, especially in the upper end type things, is say this: Mr. Seller, listen, I completely understand. Again, you always want to, be in alignment with the seller as far as not trying to make it so it is you in the market against the seller. You always want to say, I completely understand why you feel like your, Don Johnson tribute home is the best thing ever. So let's just do this. Let's go ahead and I will, you can choose your own appraiser, but let's go ahead and hire an appraiser to appraise the house. And I'll reimburse you for the cost of the appraisal at closing. And so the appraisal, what we'll do, Mr. Seller, is that'll help us to show the potential buyers and the buyer's agents what the price that the house has been appraised, and it's been appraised at what we list it for, and so they don't have to worry about that they're overpaying, because it's an unusual house for the marketplace. And I think it's fantastic. I love it. If I were in the market, I'd certainly consider it myself. But let's have the house appraised, and I'll reimburse you, so it won't cost you anything at closing. You guys getting what I'm saying there? So the house has to close for you. Would have to be obligated to pay for the appraisal. And what we'll do is we'll leave this appraisal on the kitchen counter. We'll make it clear that it's not supposed to be taken, so it's just there for them to look at, so that they can see what the comps are, and the buyers and the buyer's agents can feel more confident accepting the price as we proposed it to them. Right now, here's what I'll share with you guys. I can only remember, I can remember 0 instances where Julie and I had a seller take us up on that. And I can remember from all my literally over 100,000 private coaching calls, I maybe had 2 or 3 of my coaching clients where the sellers took them up on that. And every time it was a weird property, a huge amount of land. Yeah, exactly. Or
something unusual, like multiple structures on a lot of land, or
totally
industrial attached to it. So, something that made sense that you wouldn't know how to price it.
Or maybe like the seller doesn't know that, the house has potential value with, maybe it's a mineral rights situation, or just don't even know.
Unusual stuff.
But the point is that hopefully you're internalizing with everything we delivered to you guys today, is that you never want to be in an adversarial position to the seller, because you'll lose. Your goal is to know what the seller's motivation, their time frame, if you're competing, all the things before you go on the listing appointment. Deliver the pre-listing pack. We show you guys how to do all this in Premier Coaching at a very high level. Now, I'm going to give you one last tip before we head off into the next Zoom that we have starting in 2 minutes. You do not want to find yourself with a listing appointment not having your pre-listing done. Don't join, like we get this every day. I just got a listing appointment set, or somebody just called me to list their amazing house. I need my pre-listing pack done. I need it, no.
I need it by 5 p.m. today.
Exactly. Yeah. You've waited too long. The train has left the station and you're not on it. So you want to be prepared, to Julie's earlier point with regards to a really nicely done CMA. You want to be prepared. So you don't want to wait until you need our information in Premier Coaching until you need it. You need to have it ahead of time. Then something else that's magical that happens, and again, Julie tipped her hat on this one as well. When you have the information, when you know how to pre-qualify, when you have your pre-listing pack done, when you have a listing presentation that's unique that you're really proud of, when you know how to properly price houses, you're going to be an opportunity seeking machine. You're going to go out constantly looking for sellers present to, you're no longer going to be afraid. You're no longer going to be intimidated. So I will strongly suggest do not wait. Join Premier Coaching right away. And do consider attending our mastermind. Like I said, we're going to be doing 3 of them this week. And just go to joinpremiercoaching.com. The link is down below in the show description. We've given you guys a lot of information today, given you a lot to think about. Hopefully, we're giving you a sense of confidence that you too can master all this so you can become one of the most powerful listing agents in your marketplace because of the changes and the undulations that are happening in the market. So on behalf of Julie and myself, have a fantastic day, and we will talk with you on the podcast tomorrow.